Good morning. We are the Triangle chapter of the Antique Automobile Club of America. We have about 90 families in the club. Our cars go from about 1910 to 1990. The Antique Automobile Club recognizes all cars 25 years off the manufacturer's mark. That way we keep building into the future. What we've got here is a 1917 Model T Ford. Basically, it was assembled out of used parts. We are going to assemble the car, and we are going to hand crank it and drive it just a short distance down to about where these people are standing. When it does fire up, folks, here, I'd like you to replicate the Red Sea, like part. Thank you. One of the things that I'd like to say, we're a little bit constrained today for space. When Ford Motor Company did it, it was the factory was about 6 city blocks long, and these things rolled 24 hours a day, and they really did produce everything in the same factory. The bodies were built in one division, the engines in another, front axles, rear axles, frames, everything came together. So what we're doing is we're replicating the final assembly. We are not building the pieces, they're coming down the line. A couple other things about the car, and then we'll get on with the show. We have never, none of these men have ever worked on a NASCAR pit crew, and you will see that in a moment. Number two, due to the heat, we are going to time the show, but we are not going to try to set a record. It's just too hot. Plus, my crew is getting older.
Speak for yourself.
Yes, so is the crew chief. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to give them a start. We've got a timer, and we're going to do it, and I'm going to talk them through it, and by talking them through it, I'm talking you all to understand the action. Okay, crew, are you ready?
About break time, ain't it, boss?
Oh, one thing I just forgot. In our midst, we have a genuine UAW union member. He is the one that asked for break time, and usually, now he's not, and a raise. He's not alone. We usually have another one, and the two of them back and forth. It makes my life miserable. Anyway, we're going to get started here, and hope you enjoy the show, and keep your fingers crossed that she cranks. Okay, you ready, gentlemen? Go! They're going to put the wheels on. Now, normally this chassis would be waist high on a moving assembly line. So they would pick the wheel up and put it on and then put the lugs in it. We have to, of course, pick everything up. The bodies and the engines came from the second floor down. Now, this engine weighs about 550 pounds of cast iron. And so it takes 7 of us to pick it up and to maneuver it, because we have to hold it in the air while they fit a square drive shaft into the back of the square transmission output. So all of that was done at the factory, and it was one of the most difficult and dangerous jobs to put the drive shaft in, because if that engine slipped and your fingers were in there, goodbye. So there's a special tool, and they were very specific about using that tool. Some people did lose their fingers, but Ford, this is before workman's comp, Ford paid the employee about $1,000, and it transferred them to somewhere in the plant that those fingers were not necessary. I think that was pretty benevolent for the day, anyway. Okay. Now they're going to lift the frame, and they're going to attach the frame temporarily with clamps. And this is only temporary, just to hold it up. The drive shaft is coming up, and it'll rest on the handbrake. The front is going to be clamped on temporarily, and it'll all be bolted together in a moment. There's a peg on the top of each spring, and the rear cross member goes down into the rear spring, and the front cross member goes onto the front spring. Apparently there's an alignment problem this morning. Now you all have to realize this is Saturday. You don't get very much when you call the union hall on Saturday. Most of your A-team is on vacation. They're going to get the bar, and you'll see the lifting technique. Now remember, this was dropped from the second floor, and there was a chain holding it back, so there was some control over it, but it's still 550 pounds of cast iron. Now they'll suspend that in the air until they get that square peg in the square hole. Again, once that peg is in, the whole engine then becomes integral with the frame, the front end, the front axle, and the rear axle. It was very unique. All four wheels could be at a different height as it went down the rutted country roads, and nothing would break. So it was quite a good invention for its time. Unfortunately, they stuck with that suspension way too far. All right. It's in. They're going to put the pins and clamps on it. Now, this dashboard was all put together like this at the factory. The steering column was on it, the coil box was on it, everything was mounted. Remember, I said that all four wheels can be at a different elevation. The wishbone, which is a big Y, stabilizes the front end, and it rotates in a cup, a ball in a cup, and that gives it the flexibility to move up and down with the road changes. Ford unfortunately stuck with this whole plan until 1947, and it was way obsolete by then. We had much better roads, they were paved, and or scraped. We inherited this in 2002 from a group in Washington State who got too old to do it. And we have been adding parts to it. We're missing only 3 parts to finish the car, and that's a top, a horn, and a tail light. And we've got our lead on a tail light. So this car was built 2 years before the electric starter was offered by Ford. Other cars had electric starters by 1917, but not Ford. Henry didn't see the necessity in it. Well, in 1919, women got the right to vote, and as people in marketing said, hey, if you get an electric starter and wheels that you can take off with lugs, the ladies could buy the car and drive it. And they did, and that was the beginning of the women's suffrage movement, obviously, and it became very popular, and Ford never advertised again in a man's magazine. The only advertisement Ford ever did was in ladies' magazines, and they emphasized the feature of the electric starter and the demountable wheels and roll-up windows. So, you know, it is what it is, and the ladies were the ones that convinced the men that they really needed an electric starter. We're almost there. As soon as they finish up the front end alignment, they'll put the fender on. The next items will be the splash aprons, and that kept the dirt and debris from the road, the mud, from slinging up all over your running boards. Remember, I said that it was dropped from the second floor. The reason they dropped it is to get it over the steering column. We just have to manhandle it and get it up there. The body will be pinned on. Now, for those of you old enough to think back into the late 70s, early 80s, do you remember a fellow that used to advertise for Chrysler? His last name was Montalban. And he always said that the Chrysler Cordovas had genuine Corinthian leather. This car right here has genuine Wake Forest vinyl. Ricardo Montalban, that's right, I had a senior moment. At this point, when they get it, the seats in, we will give it a hand crank, and we should see it go down the street a little bit, and then back up again.
And 56 seconds.
Okay. The official time was 9 minutes, 56 seconds. The very best time we ever did was 5 minutes and 6 seconds for ABC News, their affiliate in Newburgh. And it was a much cooler day. Thank you.